Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the next Foreman community demo. Number 46. It is Midsummer's Day. It is a wonderful, wonderful warm day in Scotland. I mean, I say it's warm. It's 16 degrees, which is warm for here. Everybody else thinks it's freezing, I'm sure. But I'm lovely and toasty anyway. So we've got a packed show for you today. We're going to go as quickly as we can. There's lots to get through. There's some infrastructure updates, talking about Redmine, talking about packaging. There's some stuff on Docker. We've got some stuff on Content View. We've got some stuff on subscriptions. We've got stuff about discovery. We've got stuff about the unattended controller. There's tons going on today. It's going to be a packed show. We're going to get through it as fast as we can. Well, I say as fast as we can. I don't want to go too fast, obviously. You won't be able to understand anything we're saying. But we're going to try and keep it to the hour. We'll see how we go. Some quick news updates. 1.18.0 RC1 is out. Go test it. The details are in the header on IRC. They're on our release announcements board, and there's a link there for you if you want to grab it straight from the show. There's also, thanks to Lukash, a test week going on. So if you're interested in helping out, he's put up a list of scenarios that we're interested in testing, and you can go and check them off if you've tested one and you've confirmed that it works. If it doesn't, yeah, raise a bug. Also, to go along with that, Catello 3.7 RC1 is out as well, although I forgot to put the link on the slide. Do apologize, but you can find that on our release announcements page as well. We got some upcoming events, so thanks first of all to all the speakers at our conference last week in Berlin as part of OSDC and Open Source Camp. It was apparently a lot of fun. I sadly wasn't there, but I'm hearing lots of good things, and we think that's a nice format, so we might do more of that in the future. We do have more coming up. There's a video next week on the audits UI. There's going to be a birthday party with ATIX over in Germany, and we're trying to get more birthday parties going. So if you're interested in hosting an event or speaking at another DevOps type event on our behalf, get in touch with me, or Ori if you prefer. And so ATIX having a birthday party on the 19th of July, but in terms of our birthday, anything between sort of early July to early August is absolutely fine. And we know there's at least one more coming up in Pune as well in India. So there's going to be another birthday party there. But I want more than 2, so get in touch. We've also got FrostCon coming up in August as well. So we're going to have a booth there and hopefully some talks. And one I didn't put on is Open Source Summit EU in Edinburgh in October. We're going to be there. The CFP closes next week. So if you want to talk about Foreman, there's a post on our forum about that with some possible suggestions and notes and things. So I'm going to start off today. Let's get onto the content. I'm going to start off today with me, and I'm going to talk a little bit about where we're at in terms of Redmine. Now, for those of you who don't know, our Redmine is really, really old. Like really, really old. It's like 5 years old or something, and that's not good, right? And the reason it is really, really old is because we are stuck on a plugin, and I'm trying to get some agreement together to talk about how we move forward from this. And so what I'm going to show you is where I've got to. I'm going to try and do this as quick as possible because I've only got about 5 minutes. So the problem is this page, the Backlogs page, and I don't think this will even load because it's just horrendous. It comes from a plugin called Redmine Backlogs, and Redmine Backlogs hasn't had a new release in many years. It doesn't have a release for the Redmine 3.x series, and this is why we can't move forward. Not so much because we need this page, and you can see how long it takes to load. It's just ridiculous, so I'm just going to cancel this in a minute. But because it provides some fields that we're using. So it provides this releases page, which we've been using to store the
I'm not seeing your screen.
Are you not?
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Why has that not worked? Let me...
It was there for a second and then it disappeared.
Oh, I think I know what happened. Yeah, so I click. See this stop sharing button down here? I meant to click on this hide button here. There we go.
Yeah.
So there we go. There we go. We're back now. So yeah, so there was this. This was the link I clicked originally. This Backlogs link here. Don't click on that. It takes like a year to load. It's ridiculous. But this is the page that we're actually kind of dependent on because our releases are here, right? But Redmine has a concept of releases. It calls them versions, but it's the same thing. The problem is we've been using versions, to use the right terminology, to store our things like our sprint data. So things like this, right? All these down here, sprints and execute iteration plannings and team backlogs and things like this. So we're kind of abusing a feature that Redmine already has and then relying on a feature provided by a plugin to do the thing that it's actually supposed to do. Now, sadly, the version stuff that's in Redmine isn't quite flexible enough for what we want, because the problem with that is you can only select one version. And we'd really like multi-select, right? We'd like to be able to say something like, I found this issue in 1.17, .1 and .2 and .3, and we fixed it in .4, but we also backported it to 1.16, right? So you need multi-select both for the versions that you found something in and for the versions that you fixed it in. And potentially you also want a target version as well for saying, well, it's still present in versions X, Y, and Z, and we're targeting it for the next release. And then you can update that field if you don't get to it or whatever, right? It gives people the information. So what I've been working on is a quick plugin to enable that. I'm just going to show that off here. So this is, let me zoom in a little bit for the video. What you can see here is we've got the found in versions. I've picked some really old ones just by random chance, and we fixed it in the latest versions, right? And if I go to the edit field, this is a multi-select, so I can say it was also in 1.3.1, but we also backported the fix to 1.17.2, right? I can submit that. This is my development instance of Redmine, just in case you're wondering. I'm not changing things live on the site. So you can see this is now represented here, and it's all nice and shiny, right? So this is kind of what we need in terms of the data we want to store. Now, the way I'm doing that is I'm actually using the, oops, I broke it. let's go back here. I'm actually using, oh, that's why, it's because it should be this link I'm clicking. I'm using this page. And I will, for my demo later, I will be clearing out all this old stuff. But I'm using the official releases that are here, right? So I can look at 1.17.2. And this is wrong. I'm going to be updating this in the plugin later. But the idea is that we reclaim the use of the versions for actual versions. And to be clear, these can be per project. So you can have Catella versions and plugin versions and so on. And then what we do is we take all of that old sprint data and we decide whether it's still relevant, in which case we can migrate it to something like a custom field, or we decide it's not relevant, we just delete it. So that's kind of the goal. There's going to be a few tweaks I want to add to it. I want to make it so it's additive only because it is unbelievably easy to accidentally remove versions here. So let's say I'm a user and I go, oh, well, it was actually in 1.17 as well. And I scroll up here and I go, you know, it's in 1.17. And then I hit submit. Well, this is a multi-select. You have to use control right. And if you don't do that, you get rid of the other ones because you didn't see that you unselected it. So I want to make it additive. But in any case, this is the broad idea of where I want to get to. And the reason I'm showing this to everyone today is I think I've spoken to most team leads about their workflows and what they need. And I think we're all mostly in agreement that what we actually want is handleable with custom fields. Let me just show you the sort of things you can do with custom fields. So for example, I think Ivan was talking about triage. So you can do triage stuff at the moment. Only OpenSCAP is using it, but that gives you a Boolean flag on whether or not you've triaged it. You know, you can select that it's been used as a filter. We can also do things like team backlogs, which is a multiple value list of team leads, so you can assign issues to backlogs, and so on and so forth. And if you need custom fields, you can attach them to projects or to versions. So we can do custom metadata on versions as well. And then we've got all of this stuff, possibilities. So you can put dates or whatever you need on that. You can even do versions, right? So I don't know why that's necessary when you've already got versions, but anyway. So in other words, this is all here. This is kind of where I'm trying to get to, and I hope it's okay to everyone. I'm still playing around with the exact implementation, but the core idea is let's reclaim versions, let's drop releases, let's find a way to store any extra information we need in custom fields. If we can do that, then we can upgrade Redmine to version 3 and above, and that may also bring some nice features that we can use as well.
Great. Can I have a comment or a question?
Yes, of course.
The fixed in version and found in version or found in release. I'm kind of assuming that found in version can be also seen as the lowest version I found. So in this case, 1.17.2, and then I would the reader can assume that it's above that as well, and fixed in version as well. We do rarely cherry pick or backport a very specific bug into only, let's say, 1.17.2 and not 18 and onwards. But I would assume that we could also work with fixed in version in a way that if that's fixed in version 1.17.2, that also assumes 0.3 and all the major upgrades as well. So I was just trying, like, if you consider this simplified version.
We can do that. I would So it wasn't me that put up so I asked around for requirements a while ago, and the idea of multi-select came from I can't remember if it was from Eric or Evard, but it was coming from the release management side of things, and I think it's partly about generating change logs and things as well. So I'm not entirely clear on the exact reasons why they wanted the multi-select. I agree with what your reasoning there, that you can assume that it's in later versions until fixed, but you know, I'm not 100% sure of all the reasons why they want it. So
okay, this is fine. It works. Like I can still select one. That's
right,
fine.
exactly.
Yeah,
And
okay.
you know, and there's still ways we're still working on the exact implementation of what we want. The key thing I'm trying to get from people is if I drop the Backlogs plugin and reclaim versions for users' actual versions of things, is anyone going to be really, really annoyed with me? And I'm hoping the answer is no.
And my last comment is that at the last moment, you know, the last time I was checking up our Git and our, you know, Redmine Git, I saw about a half a dozen or maybe a dozen of commits on top of the version on the upstream version. So are you aware that we are carrying a lot of customization and you're going to, you know, beg for them?
I've already rebased all of that. I've rebased all of it, and I've made sure that it upgrades cleanly to the latest version of Redmine, assuming you don't have any plugins installed. You know, I took a development instance of Redmine, removed backlogs, fixed all of our commits into a logical set of about, I think, 10 or 15 commits, and then upgraded the whole thing, and it all works fine. So other than getting our workflows right, I'm absolutely confident that we can migrate this.
Great, thanks.
Just looking at other questions, Ivan's jumped in. Can you assign Foreman's version in the plugin? We talked a little bit about this. It's possible. There are definitely some people who care about this. Like you know, for some plugins it matters on the Foreman version. For others it doesn't. So I think one counterexample was actually Catello. People were telling me that, you know, because Catello is so version locked to Foreman anyway, you kind of got that. You've got that association already, right? You know, if we're talking about 3.7, you know you're talking about 1.18. But for some plugins, that absolutely matters. And it's something that's definitely in my head. I want to see if it's possible with custom fields. If it's not, you know, we can iterate on this plugin because we're obviously going to control this plugin. And the other thing that we've got some requirements around also API stuff for our tooling to be able to use as well. So you can do things like, you know, mass update the target version when we do a new release and things like that. So the actual requirements and functionalities we can iterate on. The key thing is to get an agreement that I can drop backlogs, and we can get rid of that on the current instance, get the new workflows in place, and once everyone's happy with that, before I do anything else, still on Redmine 2, we can always go back if we need to, and then when we're happy with it, we can upgrade, and then we can't go back at that point, right? So, okay, I've gone over time by a couple of minutes, so I'm going to shut up now, and I'm going to move on to our next speaker, and to do that, I need to switch back to slides, which would be a very good idea, I think. Where have they gone? Here they are. So, right, so next up, it's Tom. Tell us about Docker things, Tom.
Hello, how are you? Okay, so I'm going to do just a quick introduction to the new container image API. This is effectively an implementation of Docker V2 API, which previously... Greg, are you sharing my screens?
Yes, should be.
Okay.
Someone can confirm from the channel. That would be great. But I'll make sure of it. But I'm pretty certain that I'm sharing yours. Yes.
Okay. So previously, we exposed the registry in Foreman via an addition from Pulp called Crane. And effectively, the registry was at port 5000. It was pull only, and all of the images on the server were accessible across all organizations and all repositories. So there was no way to restrict what users could pull. So with the addition of the Docker V2 Registry API, the new registry is at just the base server name. The :5000 still exists, just for support reasons. But the full Docker API is supported. That lets us do login and search. It also gives us push. In addition, we can use our role-based access control to limit which images users may see. And to enable this new registry, At the moment, you need to hand edit the config for Catello and add a short little stanza. This stanza is still in a work in progress, so it may change. At some point, it'll be via the installer. So here's just some quick examples of what's available. So you can do Docker login, you can do Docker search, you can do pull, and of course, the new feature, you can do Docker push. I'm not going to focus on Docker push this demo. I'll do a future demo to show all the different ways to get images into Catello Informant. And so just a quick live example. My goal here is to set up a user so that they only have access to images that I've promoted to the production lifecycle environment. And this is the base set of roles that they need. So people may not be aware, but there's a new resource in Foreman, personal access tokens. Basically, you can generate these and use them as your login instead of your real username and password. So you need to get that role added to the user, both view, create, and revoke tokens. And then in my case, I gave them access to the production environment and only in the example corporation. So Docker login and all the access features do require the personal access token permissions. So let's just do a quick live example. I am not logged in right now. From that. And so I'm going to do a search. I'm going to do a Docker search against my server. You can put a pattern after the slash. Okay, I'm going to limit to 10 lines. And you can see I can't get access to anything. So I'm going to log in as, let's do the admin first. And then repeat the search. So you can see I got 10 results back. There's a whole bunch of images on this registry. And if you remember the last demo, you can see some long names. And you can also see that I've enabled some short names, some original names on some of the images. Let me log out again. And this time I'm going to log in as the developer. And I'm going to repeat my search. In this case, the developer only can see the 3 images. To them, they don't know that it's in the production environment. That's not important in my use case. It's more important that for a set of users, they can only have access to a very small subset of the images, the ones I've approved to be in production, and that's also a subset of tags, so I can enforce that they only get the latest version, for example. And I think that's enough to pique everyone's interest, and I'd love it if everybody tries it out, especially push. I'm still working on push, refining any corner cases. And that's it. Any questions? Let me look in chat.
I do have a question while you're checking out chat. So the slide says container image API. Does this mean that this API is also available to other things like is the Docker the only implementation that can pull from these?
Right now, yes. But in developing it, I would love to see, for example, file repos pass through this way as well. And maybe there's other ones, but yeah, effectively I've set up a set of routes that match the Docker API, and then I pass some of those on still to Crane, for example, and some of them I go pre-process effectively to limit the repos.
And that leads to my second question. So are those endpoints really a Catello or handled by Passenger, or are these actually pulp? You said Crane. I'm not sure what Crane is.
They're in Catello. New routes in Catello. Yeah. So
when there's a request and sucking like 200 megabyte file, that goes through Rails, or that goes to Pulp or Crane?
That goes through us. Yep, through Catello.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to move us along fairly briskly because we've got such a packed show today. So, but you're up again, Tom. So let me quickly switch back to me for the next slide. So, okay, we've done some Docker. Let's talk about Foreman hooks.
So I'm just going to talk about this briefly. There are actually 3 new hooks, and I give credit here to Justin Sherrill. He did the repository after sync hook, and then I added, based upon his work, before promote and after promote on content views. So briefly, Foreman hooks, basically you can add a script to a config directory in the Foreman install, an executable script, and then at certain points during actions, those scripts will be called. So in the case here, and this is the path where you put them, Foreman configs hooks, and then there's a very specific directory structure underneath there matching the individual hooks. And so you can see here I have repository after sync, and then content view version, because that's what actually gets promoted, has a before promote and after promote. And I added these hooks for, as I put here, an extremely too long and technical example for this demonstration. But my use case was, again, container images may be signed, and these signatures, GPG keys, are stored at a SIG store. And Red Hat, for example, has one. And so what I've set up is a script that after sync will also pull down for each of the image tags, will confirm its signature. And then in my case, before an image is promoted to the production lifecycle environment, for example, I want to confirm that it is signed. And if it's not signed, then I'll reject it and the promotion will fail. So I'm not going to run a live demo, but I did want to show a little bit of output. So in my case, if the script failed, if it didn't exit with 0, you'll get an error message in the task output. And any output that you put in there, this is just a put S in my script, just a print statement, will show up in the log. So you could put verbose information of why it failed, for example. And when it succeeds, it's green, but I've also noticed you don't get the output. And here's just an example. I did the print lines in my script, and I'm just grepping the log file as it scrolls by. And you can just see, this is for my own debug purposes. If something failed, I could see which signature failed verification as well. And I think that's it. So try it out. Ping me on IRC if there's any questions. And again, thanks to Justin for writing the first script, first hook.
Superb. Thanks very much. All right. I don't just see any questions, so I'm going to move us on. So it's over to Lukash now to talk about unattended actions.
Sure. So yeah, you should see my screen by now. And the first one is failed unattended action. So yeah, so you are all familiar with our build call, so Foreman _URL, and the call that ends the build mode. We don't have a term for non-build mode, so I sometimes use a production mode, but we all know that that's the mode when the build button is actually present. So this host is actually, I can tell this is build mode, right? And that when there's cancel build, it's a build mode. Hard to explain to newcomers. Anyway, I was not trying to improve this terminology, unfortunately, but I created a new endpoint actually. So the endpoint is named /unattended/build, and I've added a new endpoint which is called /unattended/failed. So this way we can actually tell that the host was not built correctly. So Foreman core part was already merged. It's in develop now, so heading towards 1.19, and the PR in the community template is still pending merge. But essentially, at the end of the build phase, this is kickstart. We just touch file in the temp directory. And at the end, there's another post scriptlet, and if this file exists, so there was no interruption during the big scriptlet, because we have a big scriptlet that does all the post installation stuff. It's quite long. It also logs into a file, so it is available in the installed OS under, this is a change root, so you need to scratch this, and it's available in /root/install postlog. So when something fails, we actually call, here it is, we actually call Foreman URL failed. So we only used to have build, now it's failed as well. And the failed command will lead to the build status turning from pending installation to failed, actually. So this is the root, or the idea of the change. But I went a little bit further, and I was like, okay, so since there is a new endpoint, how about to actually send the logs? So what the log file from here, we can send it along the query. And that's what I did. So it actually accepts body, HTTP body. The method is actually post. We used to have the Foreman URL build command was only get. So this is still there for backwards compatibility. We don't want you to change all your, I can understand that there are a lot of scripts in the wild using get. So the build command is now post, at least in the new version of our Red Hat template. But it also will work with get, and we also can send this file along. So it's arbitrary text. We basically store it in a database in a text field. For denial of service purposes or prevention, we just store first 32 kilobytes, and then there's a message that it was longer than that. And the way it works is I have a script here called build sh, and this is my development instance. But what I'm doing here is I have this host which has a token. Oh, by the way, this is another change. I've added this token property. If a host is in a build mode, you can finally, after 8 years, you can finally grab a token. Now this only shows up if you're an administrator. There's no permissions for that. It's really I've decided to make this very, very only if you're super admin you will see this property. Otherwise it will be missing. So what I'm doing here, and during this demo, I'm basically sending this command. So I'm sending failed actually with this token, and I'm sending a file. This is a rake file. I'm actually in the Foreman git checkout, so I was just trying to find a file which I can send. Normally this would be a log file. So I'm doing a refresh now, and the host, as you can see, exited the build mode. So as you can see, the build status is now installation error. So this is our build, our status framework. So it will show also in the list of hosts as an error. And now there is a new property shown. If there is some content associated with this host, there will be new link here. Logs from OS install is the link I've decided, or we agreed in the PR. And if you click on that, you have a very simple, just plain text output. This is fetched from the database. That's the error. That's the error. So actually, the log file, basically what you decide to send along. Now you can send the build error. The flag in database or the field in database is called build error, but you can store whatever you need, and both failed and build, only the failed endpoint will store that. Build endpoint won't accept that. And the last change, this was everything connected to builds and tokens. I've added this property called build duration. So when you have a host which was either successfully installed or it failed, there is now new flag installed at. So we had a Rails field created at, or no, it was I think built at, and now we have we can actually do duration. So when a host starts a build and ends build, either via failure or successful build, we'll have a build duration. So you can actually tell how fast you're installing your hosts. And that's pretty much it for this feature. And I'm heading over. I see Greg already switched the slide to discovered host.
I'm just going to check, see if we got any questions there before we change topic.
Sure.
Plus, I like to just really quickly switch back to my slides because then I can find it in the video afterwards. So yeah, that is fantastic. I looked at doing like a 3-state model for installations when I first joined Red Hat, 5 years ago, and now we've actually got it, so well done. So yeah, that is superb, but you've really extended that really nicely. I'm super impressed. So yeah, cool. I don't see any questions though. I think everyone gets the point, so carry on.
Yeah, you made a good point that this should be 3-state from the very beginning, but the build has always been a Boolean. So I kind of keeping this, and we're only adding this field build error. And if that's nil, that usually means that there was successful. And if that's set to some text, it is actually an indication of installation error. So we don't have full 3-state yet. I'd love to, but it was a lot of work, so I was decided to do this non-intrusive approach. So now, really switching over to discovered host name generator. So you already know that if you create a host, we have this feature that someone hates, someone loves. I was basically tired of entering those host names. I was actually hitting a host already taken for these kind of quite long random things. So you can opt out of this, if you don't like it, sure, that's fine. But what I've done, when you go to settings and discovery, or it's called discovered, previously we only had a hostname fact that was defining or configuring how you are going to discover new nodes, what name it gets. So usually this is by default set to discover_boot_if, which is actually a custom fact that is sent from discover image, which is actually a primary interface MAC address. And then there's prefix, because you don't want your DNS hostname starts with numbers. So for this reason, there's a prefix you can also change. By default, this is MAC and MAC address. So you're all seeing this. Now we have a new setting, which is kind of might start with hostname. I might change my mind and fix this, because when I was preparing for the demo, it should be maybe host name generator, so it's nicely sorted. But anyway, it's type of name generator for now, and you can select from 3 options here. So fact and prefix, and this is the default. We are not changing that. If you got used to, is basically you're getting the traditional naming. If you set it to random name, that's what you are getting if you're installing Foreman from scratch. And so these 2 names generator. So very same mechanism. It is using the same code from core and the same gem I wrote. And then there's new thing, which is also available in Foreman core, but it's turned off by default. You need to enable it. This is MAC-based generator. And this is quite interesting, because the random name generator gives you 2 random names, and every time you discover the same node with the same MAC address reported, it gets a different name. But a MAC-based generator, actually, there's a hash, basically a hash behind, which maps the MAC addresses to names. These are a little bit longer. These are 4 names. But every time you discover the host that is the same with same primary MAC address, you get the same name. So here I've discovered 3 hosts. You can see that you can tell MAC, and there's the very last one is actually the old naming convention. This is the second option you can get. So every time a random name. And this one, I think this is the most useful one. Owen Edgard only Kinsley. It's quite long, but actually this is a MAC address, and it's kind of a there's some logic behind how the MAC address is mapped to this. So if you have a one vendor hardware, so if you're all Dell, or if you have one vendor, usually some part of a MAC address, usually the first byte or 3 bytes or octets are same. So the middle names can be actually ignored, because they will be always the same. So there's no option to shorten that. You'd need to hotfix, but there's basically what you could do is change it to Owen E.O. Kinsley if you have all the all the hardware from one vendor. So anyway, this is just a slight change. You can turn it on. It's opt on and in, and that's pretty much it.
Cool. Although the storing the hash sounds like, wouldn't it have been easier to just set the random seed from the MAC address rather than storing a hash? But I mean, it's a nitpick. It's fine. So if you set the random seed, then you'll always get the same answer anyway.
Yeah, we're actually doing that. It's actually storing a seed. It's stored in the settings and random.
No, I don't mean set the random seed all together. I mean rather than storing a hash that maps the host name, the generated host name to the MAC address, you just use the MAC address as the random seed, and then you should always get the same host name anyway.
Oh yeah, that's what we do actually. I might.
Okay, that is what you're doing. Okay, it sounded like you were actually like storing them in a table or something.
No. Actually, we're using that for the MAC address as the
cool.
source for the
input.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are talking about the same thing. Marvel. Okay, cool. I don't. That's a useful 30-second discussion while we wait for chat to catch up. But I don't really see any questions. Just a lot of pluses for you. Good work there. So up next, we're supposed to have Walden, but I think Walden's still having some serious problems with the microphone. I'm just going to give him a chance to talk in case he's fixed it. No, I'm going to take that as a no. Such a technology, apparently it's working perfectly fine in another chat application and it's not working in Hangouts. So don't you just love it when things work? Unfortunately, not today. So hearing all about what's happening with the subscriptions page, I'm afraid is going to have to wait for another demo. That's unfortunate. Sorry, Walden. But yeah, we'll get you back on to talk about that for sure. Okay. Does mean we have a little bit more time, which is going to suit me nicely because I can talk a bit more later on as well. We've all gone really quickly, actually. This was supposed to be a 1-hour demo, and we're 35 minutes in, so we're all doing really well today. Okay, Eric, then, tell us about what's happening with packaging.
Can you hear me all right?
We can.
All right, so probably a little more under the covers. We've been doing a lot of work to keep packaging more up to date, to get it more automated, and to provide more feedback to developers, plugin writers, those that actually do take the time to open packaging PRs. And so these are a couple updates of things that we have done. First, if you have not looked at an RPM packaging PR recently, you now get this output of the Koji task that was created when the test was run. And if you click on it, it takes you directly over to the task in Koji, which with one more click, you can get to the RPMs that are built. So if you ever need a scratch build and you want to test it, pre-flight it, you can get to here and either download the RPMs directly, or with the task ID, you can use the Koji CLI to download the RPMs. There's also some support in Forklift for installing via a Koji ID. So if you could just grab this, you can go spin up a box and say, hey, use the RPMs from here. I want to test them before we merge them. The other part is when you click on this, the RPM part, it takes you to the newer Blue Ocean Jenkins UI. So you can see the pipeline of steps that it ran. The new things are, first, we've added RPM linting before we even scratch build. So sometimes this can find errors, or at least just keep our RPM specs clean. It will not error on warnings at the moment, but it will error if there is an egregious error. The other thing is kind of hiding here on line 10, which is that it now checks to make sure that there is a changelog entry for the version and release for the spec. In our change in tooling, some of that got kind of lost because it used to be done by the person releasing the package, and now we want it to be done on the pull request itself. So this will just check an error.
Sorry. So I'm hearing people aren't seeing your screen, but I'm definitely seeing your screen. So it's very odd. I'm just going to get someone else in chat to confirm that that's not happening. Can anyone confirm whether they're seeing it? Adam's saying he's not seeing it. Andrew as well. Yeah.
Well, not while you're talking, but while Eric was talking.
That's interesting because I definitely haven't changed anything. If it suddenly appeared, that's even more weird. Very odd. Do you want to just kill your screen share and start again?
Sure.
We have time, fortunately, to just briefly recap once we've got it working. Okay,
Right.
so Eric's restarted his screen sharing. So if anyone, it'll take 30 seconds or so for the stream to catch up. I have to admit, I hope they can see it because it's the first time I've really seen the new Jenkins UI. It's very nice. You see Eric's face. I presume you mean his profile picture and not actually his video, which would be quite freaky considering I think he turned it off. There we go. Oh, so we're getting some yeses now. I'll wait for one more. Yeah, we see screen now. Okay, you're good. So okay. I don't know how much rewinding is necessary considering we could at least hear you.
I'll just recap that, and this is a closed PR. Normally, you would just see this at the bottom. The two things we're looking at is whenever a scratch build goes through, you'll see this Koji with the task ID. If you click through on details, it'll take you to Koji. And then you can also, like I said, grab this ID if you want to use forklift. If you click on the RPM part, that's what takes you over to the Jenkins UI, where you can see the pipeline. The first thing we do is, what I was talking about, is we do some linting, some checks before we actually put any burden on Koji and try to build the RPM. So you'll see RPM lint output here. And the other thing I was talking about here is the check for new changelog entry. If that fails, this will error out here, and it will tell you, hey, there's no changelog entry for this version and release, which should give you some guidance on that you need to add one. And then there is some tooling to help with this, and that's some of the tooling that we're adding so that you can just go back and be like, add a changelog. But that will make sure that every spec file gets a changelog, which is just best practices for spec files. The thing it always previously did and still does is it builds a scratch build of whatever set of RPMs are in the pull request. And then now we've added, if successful, a repo closure check. And you can think of repo closure as when you build an RPM, it verifies that all of the build things required to build it are present. Because if they're not present, you can't build it. But what it can't validate when it does that is whether all of the requirements, things usually specified in requires, are going to be present in the set of repos that you expect that package to use. And so repo closure will download the scratch builds and then verify that RPM, all of the repos that it would use, have all of the requirements, the packages, and the versions of those packages available for that package to catch errors that we would normally catch all the way down in the pipeline. So this should catch things that would break multiple of our pipelines or potentially break other packages before they ever enter the repository. The other thing I had in there, which is JSON related, it's kind of a packaging thing. It's worth folks that do look at RPM installs and are curious know, is we've now started storing on yumtheforeman.org the Rails RPM stack that we're using per Foreman version. So there's now a folder for nightly. There's one for 118. This will allow us to update these either independently, or if we want to update nightly but not 118 because we're afraid that a Rails Z version is going to break 118, we can do that more easily than when we were using Copper directly. And that's all I got.
Superb. As I say, that new UI is really, really nice. I've not been into CI for a while, so yeah, that's lovely. I'm just going to keep an eye out for questions for a few minutes. So far, there hasn't been any. So thanks for your updates on that. And so that brings us to the last piece, which I just have enough time to cover in probably slightly more detail than I was going to. So a week ago, well, no, rewind. At the beginning of the year, February, while I was on leave, we published the latest Foreman community survey and asked you all to fill it in. And then we ran that for about 2 months, and then we asked you all, we closed it and we put the data to one side, and it waited until I got back. And hopefully you are all seeing my screen just now. Is that working for people?
Yep.
Groovy. Hopefully chat will tell me if it's not working for them in a few seconds time. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. This is a very long document, but basically I spent a decent amount of time getting into it. And for those of you who aren't aware what I've been up to in the last couple of months since I came back to work, I'm really interested in learning more statistical methods, statistical knowledge at the moment. I'm taking courses on Coursera to do with sort of data science and data analysis. And so what you see this year is much better than what you would have seen last year. Allow me to demonstrate by bringing up the survey from last year, which I believe was in March rather than in June. No, that's because I haven't put 2017 there. There we go. These were the graphs we had last year, right? And what these are, in case you don't know, are literally me taking screenshots of the data that you get from Google Forms. And so people would come to me and say, what about this? And I'm like, I have no idea how to do that. Now I do. I have much more knowledge. I have much better ways of producing data. And so what I did was I downloaded the raw CSV files from Google Forms and started parsing them myself. I've been learning R. And if you are an R user, if you want to check my working, I have actually published all of the code that I used to generate the community survey this year. And you can find it on my GitLab. This is my R Markdown file. It's not terrible. Some of the code is terrible, but when you're dealing with real data, it's really messy. So sometimes you just have to write really long case statements, right? So anyway, the result is this. And what I've done this year, what I can do this year that I couldn't do in previous years, is actually give you comparisons to the year before, because I have all the CSV files, right? So now I can start giving you trends, and I can start giving you some interesting data. And I wanted to just point out a couple of the highlights for those who haven't had a chance to read through the whole thing. So the things that I think are worthy, and it's not all good news. Some of it is good news, some of it is bad news. I'm just going to quickly page down and point out a few things that grab my attention. So firstly, the sort of age of community graph, which we do every year, which is how long someone identifies as being a part of the Foreman community. And what I want to note is that the whole thing is shifted to the right. So in 2017, we saw quite a few people in the sort of 3, 6 month, 1 year category. And now we see a big increase in the 2 and 3 year category and a corresponding drop. So we seem to have a bit of an onboarding problem. And I'm going to look into why that might be. But in the meantime, if everyone can be extra nice to new contributors, that would be amazing. Just because I don't know why people are leaving, right? Why they're not sticking around, or why they're not joining in the first place. And this might be part of a larger effort that I'm going to come to in a minute as well. We're still not great in anywhere except Europe. I'd like to see that go up. If you're considering giving an event, tell me about it. This graph, don't be misled by this graph. It appears to say that way more people are running the latest version of Foreman than last year. That's not necessarily true. Last year, the survey came out right after the release of 1.14. I think it was 2 weeks after the release of 1.14. This year, 1.16 had been out for a while. In fact, we were not far off 1.17 when the survey went out. So you expect more people to be on the latest version. What I do think is notable is that the number of people running unsupported versions was a big drop. So I think that's significant and good to see. Lots of interesting data on number of hosts, number of users, operating systems. You can have a dig through that yourself. The one thing I'll call out is a general increase in the 200 plus size of installation, which I think is a nod to the performance work that's been done in this last year. So I think that's good. This graph concerns me, but it needs a little explanation. We ask people to rate a bunch of things from 0 to 5, or in some cases 1 to 5, because we're not consistent. But we ask you to say how we're doing in various things. So how we are with bugs, how we are with features, frequency of releases, things like that. Drawing those graphs is really messy, because obviously you get kind of normal distribution over sort of 2, 3, 4 kind of thing with some outliers. And plotting that year by year is really hard to interpret. So what I did was I said, okay, let's turn it into a binary category. Either it's good support, you rate it as 4 or 5, or it's bad support, you rate it as 3 or less. Now I appreciate there's some nuance that's been lost, but this allows us to plot some nice bars. And so what you get is this. And you can see that for my arbitrary definition of good support, every single one of these has at least slightly gone down. Now, some of these will be noise, but nonetheless, when you take it over all of the graphs, I think there's a significant concern there. So again, I'm going to be looking into ways to improve this. There's some conclusions we can draw from this I'm going to get to at the end, but I wanted to just highlight that. People can have a bit of a read of that. Better news, plugins. Catello is now the top plugin. You can see this green bar here has jumped up 2 places. It's now the most popular plugin, apart from the long tail of weird stuff that people write and use. I find it interesting that other is the top one, actually, and that just speaks to that long tail of last mile kind of things that we allow people to do. But Catello is the most popular named plugin, and Ansible has jumped up hugely as well. So well done to everybody involved in all of that. I think that's a big result for you guys. Nothing particularly significant in provisioning. About the only thing I would be interested to know is how far down OpenStack has dropped in 1 year. But I suspect that's more to our lack of support for it than a lack of popularity. We haven't done a great job in looking after OpenStack, and that's just a lack of resources. Other than that, I don't think there's too much to say here, other than to recognize that the compute resource space is really volatile and changes very rapidly, and we probably need to get more people involved in trying to maintain compute resource providers and things like that. I'm going to skip a lot of this stuff because it's not massively interesting. There's some content stuff for people who work on Catello and Pulp, but largely it hasn't changed much. The only thing I think that's really significant is this big jump in demand for being able to handle Python content. So that might be interesting for Pulp to be looking at. Other than that, these graphs are largely similar, I think. Contribution is not amazing either. The biggest problem with the contribution graphs is that we don't, like, if you ask this question about what do you want to do, we mix together the people who want to help and the people who already help. So, you know, I see this huge graph, this huge increase in bugs for 2018, which is about reporting bugs and doing triage and things like that. But I don't know whether that's 50-50, people who are doing it and people who want to do it and don't know where to start, or whether it's more like 2080 or what, right? So this data is not very useful, unfortunately, because we kind of made that mistake, and I'm going to fix that next year. Nonetheless, I think overall the really notable things are things like, you know, getting feedback is not well rated, being able to find documentation is not doing well either. So we're trying to fix this. You know, we've got the forum now. It'll be interesting to see what effect moving to a forum has on next year's numbers. And that will hopefully help with people's satisfaction with things like getting support and documentation and so on. But yeah, there's some concerns. I do, however, want to call one thing out. I think most of you by now are probably already aware that there's a team, Eric's team, who's done some demos on making Foreman run in a container or a set of containers. And I think this is going to be something that we should focus on. And I should stress that this is my personal take on this, based on this data, but I know other people think the same, and I think it's going to be something that we're going to be working on. I just want to call out this graph here. This was the question we asked: what should we work on next? Now, by far and away, the biggest section to that was bugs and stability. But you can see, you know, even down here, being able to run Foreman in containers got 10% of the replies, and high availability is 20%. And so if you say, okay, if we look at containers and we say, what does that bring us? Now, I've had my eyes opened a bit here by running Discourse for the Foreman community and how smooth it is to handle it. And part of that is because it runs in a container. And that means the Discourse upstream development team have complete control of that environment. And as a result, the first question when you ask for support is not, like it is for us, is not what OS are you running? And therefore all of the long list of weird quirks that goes with that particular set of packages or that particular operating system. And I think standardizing our runtime environment helps. It clearly helps directly with the people who want to run Foreman in a container, but I think it also massively impacts this bug column here. And I think to a lesser extent, it's certainly not a panacea. It certainly doesn't solve all the problems, but I think it has an impact on high availability as well. I think it makes it easier. You know, there's still questions to ask, there's still architecture to deal with, but it helps, right? So you put those together, and you're looking at over 50% of the community that gain something from this kind of move. Now, no one's pretending it's easy. I know there's a lot of work going into it, and there's a road to travel, and there's you know, we've got to figure out the path to get there. But I think this is a really good move. And that's what I wanted to say to people. That from my perspective, as the person who sits in front of the community and talks to them and hears what they have to say and tries to go back and forth between all the people who are involved, this is what I see. Sorry for the background noise. My phone's decided it'd be noisy today. So that's all I wanted to say. If you're interested in digging into it a bit more, go read the report. If you're really keen, you can look at my code. The anonymized CSVs are available, so you should be able to reproduce my data if you wish to do so. I don't genuinely expect anyone to do that, but if you do, come tell me because I'm really interested in your thoughts. That's all I have to really say about it today. I'm just going to have a look at the messages. I don't see any messages, so this is good. Anyone on the call have any questions? Do you want to ask about that? Or are you all good? I mean, Eric, you're here, and I know this is the thing you're working on, so I don't know whether you have any thoughts. But... All right, I'm going to take that as a no then. So, cool. Okay, well, let me switch back to my slides then while we wrap this up. Yep, I don't see any final questions. So, good. Okay, so that's us done for today. Thanks everyone for presenting. I just want to call out one new thing that I did literally today. We now have a Mastodon account. If you're not familiar with Mastodon, it's a kind of decentralized open source equivalent to Twitter. I personally have been using it for about 6 months, and I really like it. And given all the fun that YouTube, all the press YouTube's had about like deleting all the Blender's videos and things in the last few days, I thought possibly getting us involved in more open source networks might be a good idea. So you can follow us on Mastodon, and we'll still all be posting the usual stuff to Twitter as well. Other than that, thank you all very much for watching. See you next time.